What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 210 of Two Amazon Sellers and a Microphone, brought to you by Solozo. And today we're going to continue the conversation of ways that you can exit your business. And we are very excited. We've got Greg Elfrink, the Director of Marketing for Empire Flippers, on with us today. What's up, Greg? How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully I'll be able to add some value to the audience here.
Oh yeah, well, we're excited. The space is just crazy right now in terms of. I always say this, but Chris and I started a long time ago, a long time in our lives, 2014. We started. The concept of selling was not even in our minds. Like, we were just trying to create a cash flow business to support our families. And there's, now it's like you can start with the mindset of trying to sell your business in a year and a half, 2 years. And there's a lot of players in the space. There's aggregators, there's brokers, there's marketplaces to list your business on. So we're excited to dive into this because we're trying to present a lot of different options to our audience of what's going on. But before we get into all that, we want to learn about you. We talked a little bit beforehand. You've got a really interesting story, at least where you're living, for sure, in your journey. So take a few minutes and just introduce yourself. Tell us your background, how you got into this space to begin with, what you were doing before, and then a little bit about what Empire Flippers and then we're going to dive into our conversation.
Sure. So I'm in Vietnam. I am a digital nomad that travels around the world. I fell in love with Southeast Asia, so I've been out here off and on for about 6 years now. Before I joined EF, I was an oil field roughneck in Alaska, like literally mixing chemicals, wearing a rubber Darth Vader suit, covered in all sorts of very bad for you kind of dust. It was terrible. So I worked in the Arctic Circle up there, very, very cold, like the ocean freezes, right? So what you said earlier, like how you guys started your business as cash flow for your family, one of the things, it was funny, I was in a meeting with a private equity office, and a family office a little while ago, and they looked at the three directors at EF, our director of operations, director of sales, and me, and they were asking our background. The other two guys, they had like great resumes, and mine was like, I'm an oil field roughneck. I better come up with something better than this, So I thought about it, and I'm very similar to what you said about yourself, and like, I am the target market of Empire Flippers in a lot of ways. Like, the people I market to are like me. Like, they started these side hustles. They wanted to change. They wanted to do something different, really, change things up for their own life, freedom, manifest destiny, all that kind of stuff. Right. So I taught myself internet marketing while I was on the rigs, like 12, 18 hours a day. I would do freelance writing. I would, come write all these plumbing articles because my first clients were these SEO agencies who had plumbers for clients and roofing clients. I wrote so much about roofing, shingles, and plumbing. Fast forward, I built up a big portfolio. I ended up joining EF. Almost didn't think I got the job, actually, because Justin, one of the co-founders, he sent me this email that was like, one of those like spam kind of emails, like just like mass rejection. And then at the end, he was like, just get in, you're hired. Like, oh God. So I ended up coming to Vietnam from there. And the cool thing about Empire Flipper is like what you said, like how much things have changed. So we were one of the, if not the original person to sell Amazon businesses. Because I still remember back in 2016 when we started selling them, Amazon was like, you cannot do that. That is fraud. They're like, no, Amazon, you definitely can do it. This is not fraud. They're selling their business. They're like, you can't sell accounts. Like, okay, but we're not selling an account. We're selling the business. So we actually worked with Amazon way back in the early days, before they even knew you could sell Amazon businesses.
It's yeah, you guys were the first. I remember back in the day entertaining an exit. I didn't do it. I probably should have, looking back on it. But I remember having a call, and you were one of the first. I think I heard it on a podcast or something. But the idea of like, oh, you could sell this actually. Like, I didn't realize that was a thing when we started. We were just starting to sell and trying to make some cash. And then all of a sudden people were like, hey, you could actually sell this asset and get a good little cash out on top of what you've already earned. But yeah, you guys were one of the first, and now you kind of opened the door, right?
Now, yeah.
There's so many.
Yeah. It's funny. I think this was 2017. It was still really early days of selling FBA businesses. We had this prospect. It was like a $400,000, $500,000 business, something like that. And they're like, why should I go with you over this other competitor? It was like another broker or whatever. So our salesperson went to their website and it had like the business models that they sold, and it said Amazon FBA coming soon. So you like screenshotted that and sent it to them, like, well, this might be one good indicator why you might choose us over the like it looks like this isn't even rolled out yet.
What year did
But
you guys
yeah.
launch? What year did the Empire Flippers launch?
Oh, the 2011 would be when we launched, but we weren't exactly a broker back then. We were a myriad of different things back then, selling like strange services, like WordPress services, WordPress plugins, really anything we could. That's how EF started. Justin and Joe, the co-founders, they were building their own websites, like monetize their affiliate and display advertising, mostly display ads, like Google AdSense, and they started selling them on Flippa, and they were blogging about this whole journey while having an outsourcing company. And eventually what happened through content marketing, which is my background, we built this audience, and our audience were like, hey, how about you just sell my site for me? Because you already have an audience, you're selling stuff so quickly. And they were like, that's a dumb idea. We can make way more money selling our own stuff. But we eventually started selling their stuff. Then we realized, oh, we were the dumb ones. They build way better businesses than us. So like we started making a lot more money from brokering. And we eventually evolved into our own marketplace. And now we're, I'd say we probably are the largest curated marketplace in the world for online businesses now. And we are very similar to an M&A advisory. In fact, I just went through a more traditional M&A advisory process. They're horrible. Like, they're not great. They're very antiquated in terms of what they do compared to us. So yeah, that's kind of the evolution in a nutshell.
I forgot about Flippa.
I did too. When you said Flippa, I was like, oh, Flippa. I remember Flippa.
From the ancient days of yore of the internet world.
I remember Flippa. I just immediately looked it up real quick. I was like, I forgot about them.
And also you brought up, I mean, it's, it's like, this is just part of my journey. It's like, I was doing everything to make side hustle money. I was doing like affiliate sites, writing, building websites, writing blogs, attaching affiliate links to it, all of that stuff back in the day. And that's how I remember Flippa to do that. And then I remember the coming, Empire Flippers come along, and I was like, oh, there's a way that I could build these and sell them. Of course I didn't. I got involved in FBA, and that got more exciting and a lot more cash. And
right. Yeah.
That's maybe because I did FBA a little better than I was doing content production for affiliate marketing. But yeah, I mean, this is interesting, and we talked about this beforehand, but we just had yesterday Ben Leonard. He's a broker, ecom brokers, was on talking about the space and the different avenues that sellers can go. Obviously, he was very pro his method of being being on the side of the seller, representing their interests, trying to find every way to make the business potentially more attractive to buyers, structuring deals that made sense for the way that the seller wanted to look. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can structure deals, whether you're getting cash up front or whether there's delayed cash payments based on the performance of the business moving forward. Making sure everything's valued properly. How does the process of Empire Flippers work? Let's walk through that first, and then I think we'll have a lot of questions about this.
Sure. So we are pretty different even from other brokers in the way we do it. So your average broker will do like assign you one person typically, and that one person does like everything, like your profit and loss statement, all the the prospectus, the packaging, the vetting, the marketing, everything, sales, negotiation. The way EF does it, we're more process based. So we've broken everything down into its own little assembly line of departments. So, for example, my team, the marketing team, are the people promoting both the brand, but also the listings on the marketplace, right? And then we have a whole vetting team that their only job is to get your business in the most presentable way and actually approve it. And since we reject, I think, around 94% of businesses that get submitted to us, like just you getting on the marketplace is a pretty solid badge of honor in a sense for your business, because we reject the vast majority of them. And once you're on the marketplace, that's when my team comes back into the mix. doing mostly behind the scenes email marketing kind of stuff, which like that sounds very simple, but it's quite complex actually, with all sorts of triggers, segmentations, all that kind of stuff. And our sales team is also starting to reach out to our buyer network, and our sales team is split. So we have a seller sales team that does most of the exit planning for the entrepreneur, and then we have the buy side sales team, and they have relationships with, say, aggregators, private equity, family offices, high net worth individuals, and so on and so forth, right? So those two teams then will come together to help you structure the best possible deal. Once that is actually done, that's when we do one thing that pretty much none of the other brokers do, which is the actual migration. So we have a whole department just dedicated to transferring that asset over successfully. And the reason why most brokers don't do it, if your audience is curious, is because of liability issues. It's very easy to mess this up, and that is just an area most brokers don't want to play in. But we do it because we think, this is like literally the most important part. If this doesn't transfer, that like everything was for naught, right? So we want to be there to help them do that. And then we also manage the actual earn out payments and stuff like that, the deal structure.
Let's start with that last part. Then I want to go back.
Sure.
Who in that transferring of the asset portion, that's after the deal's done, right? I mean, the deal's done. The business has been purchased. Now so who owns that liability if something goes wrong? Is it the buyer? Is it the seller? Is it the broker? Where is that? Like, if something did happen where there was an issue, how does that affect the deal that's already been made?
Yeah, so I'm obviously not a lawyer, but the answer would be probably a hybrid between all three. Like, pragmatically speaking, there's probably mistakes made on all sides. Some sides might have made bigger mistakes than others, but I would imagine it would be between the three. How that actually works out, like if someone went the legal route, obviously that depends on a multitude of crazy factors. But we do it as mainly as a quality assurance, both to protect the seller and the buyer. So, for example, if someone buys a business from us, they wire us the money, like say it's a $1 million deal, something like that. They wire us the money. We hold on to that money. We don't give it to the seller yet until the deal is fully migrated over to that buyer and 2 weeks have passed, which is called the inspection period. And during that period, it's kind of like the last minute check to make sure that we didn't miss anything, that the seller didn't advertise something that they weren't, and the buyer can give us the A-OK, like, yes, everything looks good, release the money. And if, like, let's say things didn't go good, say the business fell by 50% of reported earnings, the monthly net profit, the cash flows, right? Well, then the buyer can either renegotiate or reverse the deal completely back to the seller, right? So it's like a bit of buyer protection, which of course sellers hate because they want to get the deal done right away, but buyers love because they don't want to be screwed. So it's like an added layer of protection. And of course, if you have a quality business, you don't usually have to worry about this at all, barring a black swan event, right? But that's the basics of it.
How common is that process throughout the industry? Like with aggregators or other brokers, are they doing
migrations?
Like a similar process where you're holding the cash temporarily just to make sure everything goes through, sending it over. I mean, that structure, is that fairly common in the industry, or is that something unique to what you're doing?
As far as brokers go, I don't know anyone that does migrations. Usually a broker, like after the deal is done, is like, okay, go ahead, work with each other to make it happen. And like just kind of leaves you on your own to go do it. Now, there might be other brokers that do migrations now, but for the vast history of me being in this industry for over half a decade, there's no one else that does it. There might be someone now, and I might just not be aware of it, but yeah, I don't know anyone who does it. As far as aggregators go, usually the way a private deal would be done, they would hold the money in escrow and they would have all sorts of different processes. And there's probably more traps in that for an average seller, which we can go into because most aggregators are very savvy when it comes to M&A deals, and most sellers are very not savvy when it comes to M&A deals because let's face it, selling a business is what I call a highlight moment. It's like a highlight event, right? It's not something that happens every day for you. But like even a prolific business seller, like maybe you're selling a business once every 2 years versus someone like an aggregator whose background is M&A finance a lot of the times. they're doing deals every single day, right? Like they're not buying deals every day, but they're looking at deals all the time. They're in negotiations all the time. They just have way more reps on the basketball court than the seller. So that can lead to a lot of disadvantage to the seller when it comes to private sales. Not always. I'm not trying to cast them in bad light. Sometimes it's great to go private, especially if you want to go fast. I think that's probably the fastest way is to go private.
Interesting. Let's go back to what you had a roadmap that you went through of the journey for this process, but you said that you typically reject seemed like a high majority of the businesses that are presented to you to go on the marketplace. What are the reasons for that? Are they not hitting certain metrics? What is it that causes you guys to reject a business from going onto your marketplace?
Sure. So there's a few different things for e-commerce entrepreneurs specifically, and this is like broader most entrepreneurs too. But I think e-commerce especially suffers from this because I would wager a little bit more complicated for them than other business models, and that's their profit and loss statement. This is almost always wrong when we get it from an e-commerce entrepreneur. It's like broad strokes could be trending in the right way, but what we'll do is we'll rebuild that entire P&L from scratch. And sometimes that entrepreneur realizes like, oh shit, I'm making way less money than I thought, right? I like, okay. And so now the valuation is not going to hit where they thought. They're like, well, let me go back here and fix some stuff. So that would be like a rejection by seller, right? The seller is rejected and we understand like, okay, cool. Let's team you up with our exit planning team to help you get back on track, come back in like 6 months when you hit these like metrics, right? What they want for their valuation. So that'd be one example. Other things that can happen is steep declines. Stock outs can be really dangerous to a business. A lot of times stock outs are so bad that a buyer won't even look at it. So that's something we're looking for. Having too many SKUs for too small of a business is a bad trap. Like if you have a very small FBA business, a $150,000 FBA business, you have 100 SKUs, like that's a lot to manage for not a lot of return, right? So these are things we look for. Of course, there's gray areas too, like CBD, anything with CBD and hemp, stuff like that. We won't sell traditionally just because it's such a gray zone on Amazon. But those are some of the hallmarks. Another one that can be quite common is experimental marketing that is too close to the point of selling the business. So like if you're 3 months out from selling a business, you probably don't want to go launch your new product that's untested, that's going to sap away all your free cash flow and thus hurt your valuation most likely. And it's not going to do anything to increase your valuation because there's not enough time to really ramp it up to where it could be. Same with like experimental ad campaigns. It's not fully optimized. So we try to get people to stop all of that at least like 6 months before the sell of the business.
So it sounds like it's not necessarily like a permanent rejection. It's just more of you need to get these things in order first before this is going to be potential for sale. So like what percentage of the people that get initially rejected end up coming back on and selling through you guys?
Yeah, I mean, if it's rejected like what I said there and there's no nefarious, I would wager between 60 and 75% of people come back to us over a period of a few months or maybe a year down the road or something like that. And I think that's one of our things, and that I really love that we do is that like we will tell a seller like, look, yes, we could list this, you have a quality business, but I really think you shouldn't list this because you can get a lot more money if you do X, Y, and Z and then come back to us at a later date. Like we would love the revenue obviously right away, because who knows if they'll ever come back to us, of course, but it's the right thing to do in the end. And that's what we like to consider ourselves as. Like even our salespeople, they're not really selling, they're more like coaching and consulting, right, to try to help you get the best deal for what you built. And sometimes that is the right move, is like hold off for a little bit longer. Not always, but in these scenarios it usually is.
It's so interesting.
I know. I'm looking at the site now. There's a price here, and I love that you're just very transparent. Like it shows all the pending sales, it shows the actives, it shows the new ones. There's a one here for 30 million. It says pending sale. Massive company. 780 SKUs, 5 trademarks. Like this is a massive deal. How long does it take to close a deal like that? Like by the time they list it, by the time it closes, like what's the time frame?
So there's weird things that happen that you would think would be intuitive are actually not real. So the bigger the business, like over $10 million, the faster it will likely sell than say a $1 to $5 million business. In fact, the hardest price point to sell a business in that we have seen so far, at least, is between the 500,000 and $1 million range, because it's just slightly too small for private equity, family office, and like aggregators to look at for it to be interesting, and it's like slightly too big for like the bootstrapped entrepreneur, where like throwing out $750,000 is a big ask for their nest egg usually. So like that's tends to be the hardest business to sell. But as you go higher up, it actually gets easier to sell. And anything underneath $100,000 is very quick to sell usually. But once you get above $10 million, there's an interesting thing that happens where there's all sorts of financing options that are now available that aren't there at the lower end, and you are dealing with people with a lot of money where say 10-20 million dollars represents a drop in their overall money raised bucket, right? So like even if you have a $30 million one product only business, there's a confluence of people competing for you. That's something we are really good at, that aggregators love us, but they also hate us because we make them compete against each other so much, which is great for the seller, not great for them. But yeah, the higher it goes, the often the easier it is to sell, as long as the business is still quality. That's the core fundamental.
What of the businesses that you sell, like what's the breakdown of like how many end up going to aggregators, how many of them go to like family businesses and
Mhm.
private equity? How does that breakout look? Is it all over the place?
Yeah. Uh, it's a good question. So anything over seven figures will most likely be an aggregator. But the thing is, like private equity and aggregators, they kind of like walk hand in hand, because usually it's the private equity funding the aggregator. So like the investment mandate of the private equity person rolls down into the aggregator. Sometimes a private equity or family office will have like a dedicated operator. Like have you ever heard of you guys know what a search fund is?
Uh-uh.
I don't think so. No.
So, so a search fund is a very interesting concept that is kind of like an aggregator but different. It's been around a lot longer than aggregators. So basically, what it is like, say I'm an MBA finance student from the School of Wharton, something like that, some very high finance, very esteemed school. And I don't want to go into high finance myself. I want to become an entrepreneur. So what I'll do is I'll reach out to all my connections in private equity and tell them like, hey, let me go be your bird dog, basically, to go find you deals. Because the thing with private equity, they want to buy solid businesses, but they don't run them. They need people to run the business for them. So what the private equity firm will do, they'll hire them as a search fund, put all this money into the search fund, pay them a nominal fee, say 50, 70K a year, something like that, while they will hunt across the country for a good business. They'll find a business, give it to the private equity. They'll do due diligence together. The private equity will give that person the money to buy the business. So now they own like a large portion of equity in the business, say like 30, 40%, and private equity owns the rest. So private equity is like a win-win. Like we got someone to do all the groundwork for us for pretty cheap. And we got someone that we can trust to run this business because we like vetted him very hard. So sometimes you'll get a search fund kind of situation like that. And aggregators are kind of like almost a modern take on that for the internet age, because usually a search fund will be buying one business that's like 10 million and up, because again, like it's not as interesting if private equities if it's underneath 10 million. But the aggregators are kind of a hybrid, because they're like, hey, let me build a search fund for one business model like Amazon FBA, and now they're buying up all of these businesses, rolling them up into one giant brand that's worth a lot more than the sums of its parts, right?
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, interesting. We got a couple questions coming in here actually. Chris, you want to pull
Oh,
those?
cool.
Here, I'll take the branding off here, Chris, and you can pull that question in. All right, from Ruben. Hi guys, is there any rule of thumb you have when buying on revenue side or profits? What's your thoughts on that, Greg?
Interesting. I think he's mean. I don't quite understand your question, Ruben. If you're talking
Sounds
about
like
like,
it's like a high revenue company and they're just launching a lot of products and maybe their profits aren't as high as they
yeah,
should be because there's just so many products.
yeah, that's what I think you're saying as well, Ruben. Like, I would be very careful buying a business based on revenue at all. Like, most businesses are bought with SDE, which is seller discretionary earnings, or EBITDA, which is very similar to SDE. They're almost exactly the same, but EBITDA is usually used for bigger businesses, and that's earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. I always say appreciation. That's amortization. But so that's based off net profit, and net profit is important for you as a business buyer because that shows the business has traction and real like staying power with it, that it can be ran sustainable. And that is, like, in my opinion, I don't know this for a fact, but this is just my view. Like, one of the reasons why most businesses fail is because they cannot create sustainable traction. And that's one of the huge benefits of buying a business, because you're already through the startup phase. If you're buying something based on pure revenue that doesn't have a lot of profit, you are basically still buying something that's in that startup phase, and that's a lot more dangerous. Not saying it's not a terrible idea. It's just more dangerous. The only business model that is routinely sold based on revenue, and they use a growth model, which most businesses don't use a growth model, would be something like SaaS, software as a service. But in general, I would try to avoid buying things based on a revenue valuation.
He has another question, Chris. Let's
there it is.
One real quick. Have a question regarding sellers who are in a range of 200 to 300K a year. What is the pool of candidates that are in that price range?
I think you touched on that earlier.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let me pull my calculator. So 300K. I'm assuming that's profit annually. I always work in my head in monthly because the way we're set up, 25,000. So let's say 35. Yeah, so this would be in that range I was talking about, that $500 million range. So the pool of candidates here, there's a few of them. There are the bootstrapped entrepreneurs that I talked about before, and typically almost every buyer in that space are going to lowball the seller in some shape or form, because usually they don't, like, either they just simply don't have a lot of money, so they have to do a deal structure to mitigate risk, which we can talk about with buyer strategies. Mitigating risk is one of the most important things. That's why buyers should really be obsessed with deal structure. But other times, it's the reason why they'll lowball the sellers because they know that the seller doesn't have a big pool of buyers at this phase, right? So the seller is more likely to give in to a more advantageous deal structure to the buyer, just knowing that there's not that many candidates. So if you're looking at buying a business in this range and you have proper funding, I would say you can get the best deals in terms of multiples in this range. If you're the seller, I would highly recommend, like in the numbers you gave, at 300K, that's like a valuation around $8,000 or $75,000. I would really push yourself to try to get above the 7-figure range before you sell, ideally. Now, if you need the money right away, or if you have an opportunity, I wouldn't take that advice. But if you're okay with waiting, I would try to get above the 7-figure valuation when you're there.
So typically multiples are increasing the higher the valuation of the business. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
That is typical, yeah. So there's a confluence of events that does that as well. Like, as your business goes up the value chain, especially above the 7-figure range, that's like a really big threshold for your multiple to have a bump, because there's so much more demand for those businesses. So that just inherently creates more value. In the $500,000 to $1 million range, there isn't a very big bump from what came before it. So that's why I suggest trying to get above that 7-figure valuation.
And what are you seeing in terms of multiples right now? Are they increasing, decreasing, flat? Like what are those, and what's a multiple?
And as a buyer, can I say, I don't want to, or as a seller, I don't want to go 38x. I think my business is worth 50x or something. Like, can I control that?
Yeah. So I'm just going to load up my industry report here. We just created this like real-time Google Data Studio of everything that sells on our marketplace. But that's all that kind of data on. So I'll wait for it to load. But to answer your question, yes, you can control that to a degree. Now, if you go private, obviously you can say whatever you want. If you go with us in vetting, what we'll do is we'll tell you, like, okay, look, this is what we call your typical valuation based on our actual sales data. This is like the best range for you, between like 35 and 37x. And they're like, okay, well, I want higher than that, right? Because everyone wants higher. We will tell them, like, okay, this is what we will call the absolute top valuation. So we have a range, an absolute bottom and an absolute top, that if a seller for whatever reason wants to go outside of the typical, we have a range that is like a possibility there that we think is still doable. And we'll tell them that and say, like, hey, look, I wanted to be 80x. Like, okay, well, then you probably shouldn't use us. Because like we're not going to get it for you. And this is one of the other things that's a big difference between brokers and a lot of other brokers and us. Not all brokers, of course, but some brokers, they'll tie in a seller who has this dream of having a Silicon Valley style exit. And that's all it really is. It's a dream for most e-commerce stores. And they'll like, yeah, come in. We'll give this huge multiple. You sign the agreement with them, and now you're locked into exclusivity with them for 6 months. And then they just start beating you down with reality, right? Like no buyers are coming in. And eventually what happens, sellers get fatigued and they're like, screw it. Just like, yes, I'll sell it for that amount.
Just get rid of it.
Don't even want to look at this thing anymore. Yeah, right. Which we do not do. We do not do that. We're very upfront about it. And our exclusivity is only 2 months anyways. We sell like average businesses. I think it's 25 days to sell once you're on our market. So, but to answer your other part of the question, so I'm looking at the report right now based on 2021 numbers. With 106 business sold, the average sales multiple was 43.1x, and that's monthly EBITDA, not annual. So 43.1x.
Is that increasing, decreasing?
So that's an increase. So in 2021, it increased by 43.8% from 2020. So that's a big increase, right? So there's a few things that happened there. And I don't want to leave your audience thinking like things are going nuts with like huge valuation increases, because 2021 actually did go nuts with the whole advent of the aggregators coming in. And you also had commercial real estate investors coming in, selling like their apartment blocks and strip malls because of COVID. So they were also getting into the space. And then all this hype of the aggregators led to like your average investor also wanting to get in the space. So this created a huge amount of demand, right? We're not seeing that now in 2022 at the end of Q1. So multiples have stayed flat or kind of lowering from that 41 that I just said, right? Right now I feel like we're probably at the end of the season of the seller. So like if your audience wanted to sell and get the best possible price, now's the time to do it. Because I think in the next few months, as capital markets get tighter, the valuations might become a little bit more unstable. They'll still probably be really good. I don't think they're going to go like nosediving, because so much of the growth of online business multiples are now at parity with, say, like, you know, your local business, like a car wash or whatever, which historically online business has always been much lower multiples than those. So I don't think it's going to go off a nosedive. But if you want to get the best of the season of the seller, I would have some urgency to sell now.
Let's get, you want to bring these questions in, Chris, because this might be interesting too.
Okay. And Ruben, you may just want to reach out to the Empire Flippers. Just get on a call with them.
Yeah, shoot me an email, Ruben. It's cool.
Yeah, there's got a lot of questions in here. Let me pull some of these up here. Kind of a longer one here.
Yeah, he's saying, sorry for the confusion. I was basically interested in understanding if you reject, let's say, accounts that are only 100K a year with revenue, 100K a year revenue with 20% net, or the revenue does not matter as long as the net profits are stable.
I got you. Yeah. So our minimums, you have to be making an average, a 12-month average net profit of $2,000 per month of like pure net profit on average. And then like we have other criteria too, but that's the like core of it. As long as you're above that threshold, there's a good chance that we'll look at your business seriously from the marketplace. So it's not very big to meet our threshold. We saw anywhere between 80K businesses to what you guys just said, 30 million, right? So it's quite the range.
That is a range.
You got it.
I like that 30 million one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the like common seller traps that you see.
Sure.
I mean, obviously in this space, I mean, people that are looking to buy, you buy low and you sell high. That's business. You're trying to get the best deal you can get if you're the buyer. I'm sure there's sneaky tactics involved in that, and I'm sure across the board, the huge majority of people that have just put their sweat and tears into a business, just growing it, they love it. It's like their child that they're raising, and now they're presenting it to the market, trying to sell it. But they are not M&A experts. And I'm sure there's a lot of different contractual language and different deal structures that you could have done better if you knew. and
Yeah.
you know you get stuck with them. So what are some of these common seller traps that you see?
So real quick on the deal structure one, and this is something it can happen. It's not super common, but it can happen. So if you go private, you should watch out for this. If like an aggregator gives you an earnout, yeah, that might look really good on paper, like that you can like, oh, I'll get paid all this extra money if the business does X. Well, sometimes aggregators use that terms to get you excited because they know the business has no chance in hell doing that. But it looks good to you, so you'll take the deal, not realizing that the buyer tricked you because now they just mitigated ever having to pay you that capital because your business simply won't grow to that level. That's actually a real thing that happened on our marketplace, and we stopped the seller from saying yes and protected them against that. So that's a tricky thing to watch out for. The other thing you kind of also said, Dustin, which is something I called emotional equity. So since our businesses make up 60 to 80% of our net worth, if not more, as we get to the point of selling, this is a very emotional thing. And we charge our businesses with like, getting rid of my commute, staying home with my family, traveling the world, all this stuff, right? Like the internet gave me the ability to leave the oil field to come to Vietnam where I met my wife, right? I have a lot of emotional attachment to this stuff. And that can lead to the emotional equity thing where we value our businesses way more than it's actually worth. Like, you're like, oh, this is the next, $8 million deal. And the buyer, like, well, according to the P&L, is the next like $1.5 million deal, right? Like, they're using a much more colder arithmetic, which is probably more accurate than your emotional equity thing. So that's something to check out the door when you go to sell, which is really hard to do, but we coach you on that kind of stuff. The other thing, and I think this is by far the most common trap, and is a very insidious one because on the surface it sounds super correct until you dig just a little bit deeper into it. And it's what I call the off market fallacy. And this is going to sound super promotional, but I do not mean that in this way. But the off market fallacy is basically the concept of I'm an entrepreneur with a say a $4 million FBA business, and I don't want to pay my 6-8% to EF or another broker to go sell my business. That's ludicrous. I'm not giving away that much of my business, right? I'm going to go do it myself. And so they go do it themselves. And the buyer, which in this case would probably be an aggregator with this example, but it happens with non-aggregators too. They'll be like, yes, of course, you're so smart for doing that because we have to pay a premium. And that's really all the broker's getting is the premium. So you're very, very smart. And the seller feels great. Like, yes, yes, yes. The real thing is the buyer is tricking the seller. They like buttering them up. Like, you're making the right move. But the thing is, a buyer's only benefit to not using a broker is to get the deal cheaper, which is the exact opposite of what you want. That's the reason why they go and build private deal flow. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month building private deal flow, specifically that no one else will know that you're on the market. So the thing is, like, when you come to a broker, that the buyer knows, oh shit, now I have to like compete against all these other buyers, which is going to drive up your price. And like, just two quick stories on that. Like, we had a seller, they got an offer, private deal, $1.4 million for their FBA business. And that they had like 3 days to decide. And this is a very common tactic in the private market where they use a sense of urgency to get you to act now because they know you're likely a solopreneur. $1.4 million, like, holy shit, that can change my life, right? Like, that's huge. All I have to do is say yes, and I'm a millionaire in 3 days. That's very attractive. And so they'll use that. And most of the time, people don't get a second opinion because they're overcome by the urgency, right? The scarcity of the deal. So this guy came to us. We told him, like, look, we can sell it for way more. And he got on the marketplace. I think it took like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks later, we sold it for 2.1 million. I was just in Dubai giving a speech at Affiliate World, and I ran into one of our other customers just randomly. She had a very similar story. They offered her $600,000, and we ended up selling it for 1.6 million. So, did we make commission? Of course, we actually they paid us more than they expected. That we got a bigger commission than either of those sellers were expecting because we ended up selling the business for way more. But at the end of the day, they have way more money in their pocket. So, like, who really won, right? Like, the seller, of course, won. Like, that's what it's all about. So the off-market fallacy is like a very insidious thing. And that's not just like, I'm not saying you have to use a broker with that. I'm just saying be aware of that from the buyer's perspective, the only reason to do a private deal is to get you for less than what you're worth. Like, that's what they're going for.
Yeah, I mean, that's always I guess in the back of your mind, you're like, could I get more for this? Could I get more for this? And it's just so, I mean, I think it would be so hard. I mean, if somebody just said, hey, I've got 1.4 million for you right now,
Yeah,
Do
it's
you
tough
want
to
to
say
take
no
it?
to that. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you start thinking, well, that's a life-changing number right there. But if that 1.4 should be 2.4, that's crazy. It's like
Yeah.
that yeah, you need somebody, an advocate on your side for sure, who's in the weeds on this. I mean, I see it just like anything else in the business. If I'm a really good at product development and I'm really good at manufacturing, sourcing, getting products, but I'm terrible at advertising, maybe I should talk to advertising experts. For that.
Right. Yeah.
And I can assure you, I'm not an expert on mergers and acquisitions. So you'd probably want to have an advocate or somebody working for you for the best result in that case. And there's lots of options out in the space right now. But it's
Certain empire flippers is pretty good.
yeah,
Kidding.
no, it's just interesting to hear. It's interesting to hear points of view from all different aspects of this. I mean, we have aggregators on our show. Like we said, we had econ brokers on. Now we're talking to you. I guess the reality is it's got to be the right fit for the
Yeah.
seller.
Just to be clear, because I feel like I badmouth aggregators. That's
No.
not my intention. Like, there are certain cases where you should definitely not use a broker. For example, if you need to sell quickly, that is one of the best benefits of going like direct to an aggregator to sell it quick, because they will most likely get the deal done way better than for us. And sometimes selling quicker actually leads you to more money, because say you have an opportunity to use that $1.4 million on a limited time opportunity that can 2-3x it very quickly, but you have to act now, right? Like in those cases where speed is of necessity, sometimes you will make way more money. Other times too, like you can build partnerships with them, all sorts of different stuff. So I'm by no means saying broker is 100% right at all. And that's something we'll tell you even too. It really depends on your goals, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it sounds like if you're trying to maximize the value of your business right now, that's when a broker is very not
sure.
right now, but if you're trying to maximize your exit, utilizing a broker would be the way to go. If you're trying, if I've got an opportunity right now, if I had $1 million to invest and I've got a hot opportunity, then I could take $1 million for my business, and that's fine because I'm able to turn it in. That makes a lot of sense. Right now in the aggregator space, it's really interesting. Obviously, I'm not in that space, but you hear all the stories of what's going on. But what is your perspective on how that aggregator space is moving? Because it looks like a lot of the really early aggregators, the ones who got a ton of investment, a ton of capital, and they were buying up. They had to spend that money, so they're buying it.
Right.
As many businesses as they can. Seems like they figured out that maybe they didn't have their operations fully in place to handle everything that they were buying, and a lot of what they bought just started to trickle downwards a little bit, and they had to. It seems like some of them are putting a pause right now. They're trying to get that aspect buttoned up before they continue buying more, and it seems like other aggregators in the space, they've got strong operations. They're buying businesses and growing them and doing really well. What do you see in that space? I'm sure you guys, I mean, you sell to a lot of aggregators and
Right.
on the marketplace. So what are you seeing from their side?
Yeah. So, I mean, what you just said there is pretty close to what I see. So, like a lot of the aggregators, they come from that M&A background, so they're very good with the finance, with the structure, the M&A portion of it, but they lack a lot of the entrepreneurial skills that got the business to where it is. And I think for many of them who don't have a lot of like more scrappy business experience, like being an entrepreneur on their own, they're finding out that spreadsheet math and forecasting doesn't always work, right? Like, so like if you buy a business, you like put the forecast into a spreadsheet, you know, eventually just becomes this ridiculous number with the formulas, right? All that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean you're going to get there. Like, you have to be good at copywriting, PPC, organic ranking, supply chain, 1,000 different things that has nothing to do with this calculation in the formula. You're not taking into account your own skills, right? And so I think a lot of the aggregators have fallen into that trap. Not all of them, obviously. Some of them are doing really, really well. But even the ones that are doing really well, they often don't have the same scrappiness as that original FBA entrepreneur. They're not willing to do what it takes to scale the business up, like what the original owner was willing to do, right? So that's some of the issues there. The other thing that aggregators are doing, they're moving a little bit more up market a lot of the time. So above the $10 million range, right? Where there's less competition because the new aggregators are all competing in that sub $10 million space. So the ones that are more established are moving up. The other thing aggregators are doing is they're buying the entire ecosystem. Like the smart aggregators are buying the whole ecosystem. So what I mean by that is they're not just buying FBA, they're buying DTC stores, they're buying 3PL warehouses, they're buying people with retail distribution channels. In some cases, like one of the biggest aggregators, they buy affiliate sites from us, and they buy affiliate sites in the niche of their main products. Like if they're selling, like, say, a dog food product or whatever, they'll buy a dog affiliate website from us as a way to build up a media brand around that business. So they're buying up the entire ecosystem for the ones that are smart. But you are right that a lot of them have stopped buying and they're pausing because they're realizing, like, maybe we're not as good at operating these things as we initially thought.
I want to touch on that buying the affiliate sites, because that is actually interesting. I think there's a play there for a lot of brand owners. Because so they're buying if it's like an affiliate blog that's in the dog niche, they're buying that website and then they're just changing all the links to their products. Is that what they're doing?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
probably their affiliate link too.
Right. Yeah. To get a double dip on both the Amazon Associates cookie and the actual margin on the product. Yeah. And we've sold businesses that come as a package like that. We don't see them as often as before, but they're great. Like, and if an FBA entrepreneur, like say someone's out in the audience who wants to do it and don't want to spend money buying an affiliate site, let me give you a quick tip to like bank on SEO. It's very simple. I have a lot of SEO friends because that's my background. So one of the things you can do, like say you were selling a blender on Amazon, something like that, go to Google, type in best blender reviews, top blender reviews, all that kind of stuff. All top 10 Google searches that will come up will most likely be affiliate websites. Look for one that's somewhat small, that something that isn't massive. Then reach out to the owner and be like, hey, I would like to be included on this list of top 10. I will pay you, say, $50. And a lot of the times you don't even need to send them your product. They'll be like, sure, I'll just change the link, because there's no skin off their back. Like, whatever, I'll just change the link and like write up a little thing and boom, there it is. And then you can do another thing where you reach out to them like, hey, I see you have all these like individual blender reviews are ranking that are my competitors. When if I paid you like $1,000 to go and at the end of each of those articles have a CTA of some sort that leads to my individual review on your website, or just a link to mine, like say like, hey, I think this blender deserves more of your attention or whatever. So that's a really easy way to tap into the SEO world without you doing any SEO. You can't build a media brand off that, which is what I really recommend you do. That's what like the aggregators buying these affiliate websites are doing. They're building email lists and stuff, but that's a very cheap way for you to get into some of that action.
That's an interesting play.
Yeah,
I'm already doing it. I'm doing it right
now. This is great. Change this link.
That's a great play. I mean, I've seen you see that in other industries. I see this all the time. And there's this whole other business model of, creating a website if you're an affiliate marketer, and like, let's say it's like bouncy houses in Kansas City. You like create this website and then you're selling that traffic to a bouncy house company. And
lead gen.
So it's really that's a unique play for brand owners, because a lot of those guys, you're right. What do they care what the affiliate link is? It's going to Amazon. it's good, you
Yeah,
know, and they're probably glad someone reached out because it's
if you look into the mattress space, they do this stuff all the time. So if you type in like a Sealy mattress or something like that, pretty much all of you see on the first page of Google is them, but they don't want you to know it's them. So because like they'll like go to these people. Like I have a friend, he used to have a mattress website and as an affiliate, and they would literally pay him like $10,000 a month just to put his thing number one. And they would also run like $3,000-4,000 a month of Google AdWords traffic to his review, where he could still collect the affiliate commission off of the traffic that they're sending. Because their idea was like, we want to be everywhere, but we don't want to look like it's just us saying all of this. So they'll like go and recruit these other people to create these branded websites all around. So it's a very similar concept there. One other trick you can do if you're running ads for your FBA site is go to those affiliate sites that said yes to you and ask them if you can do a pixel share, which is, I believe, still totally allowable on Facebook. And that way you can now run ads to their actual target audience that visits their website.
I think we need to have you on, Greg, for a whole nother podcast.
I'm a marketing nerd.
Yeah.
Well, does this add to the valuation? Like if I've done this and I've got all these links that are going to my Amazon listing, like how do I prove that? How would I prove that to a buyer? Like, hey, look, I also have done all this blog article, SEO stuff. Like that's got to have some sort of value.
It does. Yeah, it does. So like that is what we call a traffic diversification, right? So the more diverse your traffic is in a meaningful way, like if it's like 5%, it's not going to have very, big effects, but it's like 20-30%, that can have a serious effect, especially if the Amazon side is doing very healthy as well. Because what's happening here is like, okay, if I'm not ranking in Amazon anymore, no big deal, because I still got this 30% of SEO traffic coming in that my competitors don't have. Or like, hey, I have these relationships. So every time I launch a new product, guess what? I can get SEO traffic coming to my new product, which is like the most commercially intent viable traffic on earth to rank my products really quick. Amazon loves seeing SEO traffic. Like there's an argument to be made that SEO specifically benefits the traffic, your like organic product on Amazon better. But I think it's because SEO traffic also just converts the best out of any traffic. And so that just like triggers the algorithm better for Amazon. But yes, it would increase your valuation for sure.
Cool.
That is interesting. All right, Greg, we're running up on a little bit of time crunch here.
Sorry,
no, this is great. We can talk all day on this. I've got one last question for you.
Sure.
Ruben had a question in here. I'm going to reframe it and see, because it's interesting to me. Do you see a lot? Are you selling businesses through Empire Flippers? So the buyer buys it, improves the business, and then resells it through Empire Flippers for a higher multiple? Is that common? Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, so that's where we get the second part of our name from, is the Flippers. We call them Flipper Freds. I've seen the same business sold on our marketplace 4 times.
What was it? Flipper Freds?
Yeah, Flipper Freds.
That's
Buy
awesome.
low, sell high. They're like the real estate flippers, house flippers, same concept. Yeah, I've seen the same business sold 4 times.
4 times. In what time
yes.
frame? Like once a year?
Over a period of I think it was over a period of like 2.5, 3.5 years. So this is one of the secrets about buying businesses a lot of people don't realize. Like to sell a business, you usually have to have like 24, 36 months of data. You don't need that at all when you buy a business, because when you buy a business, it already has that data. So you can sell a business a lot faster if you bought it than if you built it. So I have a whole concept called asset flywheel, which probably don't have time to get into. That's all about this concept of snowballing assets through this. But one of the funniest stories I've seen is this guy is a small affiliate website. And I'm not recommending anyone do this because I've never seen it happen again. It's very risky. I wouldn't recommend it. But this guy, there was like $104,000 affiliate website. It was like tons of competition for it. And so he got it. And then he was like, hey, that seemed like it was pretty tough for me to get. Is there anyone interested in still buying this site? And we're like, yeah, there's a lot of people interested. And you're like, okay, I'll sell it to them for 115K. Like, okay, so we'll reach out to all the people there, right? So we haven't even transferred this site over yet, mind you. Like, we're just starting the migration process. We just got the money in. He's owned this site for like 20 minutes, basically. business made 15K off of it by selling it to another person, right? Like you can never do that with a business built from scratch. But if you buy a business, you can definitely do it, because it's not like all that history goes away just because you happen to own it for 10 minutes, right? But again, I've never seen that happen again, so I really want to recommend that. But it's a really funny story.
That's okay. Chris, we got a lot of new side hustle.
Yeah, let's pull our money together. Just keep buying and
come on into
reselling.
the marketplace.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, great. Everyone who's listening right now, if they're ready to move in this direction, to exit or buy or whatever their goal is, how do they get in touch with you? How can they start working with you at Empire Flippers?
Sure. So empireflippers.com, if you want to see what your valuation worth, or what your business is, we have an automated valuation tool, just empireflippers.com/valuation tool. If you want to get a hold of me personally, it's just Greg at empireflippers.com, or you can add me on LinkedIn. Just Gregory Elfrink there. I think my LinkedIn URL is like Greg the Writer or something like that, because I write a lot. But yeah, I'm usually pretty open. If anyone has any questions, always down to help or try to push you towards someone who can help you, I think.
Excellent. Well, everyone go check them out, empireflippers.com. Greg, this has been really fun. We are going to get you back on because we're going to talk about other stuff next time. All these little SEO hacks that you've got, that's invaluable. I'd love to pick your brain on those kinds of things as well.
I think some of the most powerful things is combining two unrelated things, because no one does it. And now you're operating kind of in a blue ocean, right?
Yeah. I love it. I'll be doing some of that later this afternoon.
I love
it. Sure. All right. Thanks, Greg. That's been a lot of fun. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. If you like content like this, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. You can also see our live streams on all of Solozo's social media platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. They're all there, so you can watch the live stream. Additionally, if advertising on Amazon is a struggle for you, or you're not getting the results that you're looking for, we can help you at Solozo. Go to solozo.com. You can book a demo. Chris or myself will walk you through the platform, show you how Solozo can help optimize all of your advertising campaigns that you're running and launch the most strategic campaign structures to get you to your goals. So again, solozo.com and book a demo. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks.